How Vietnam was often called the living room war. It was the war that television brought into our homes on an unprecedented level. But we have to remember that the 1960s were also the era where we had the periodicals, the magazines that brought those still images, as television was really still coming into its own. Tell us a little bit about the power of the image in the 1960s and 70s to help the citizenry understand the world around them.
Well, of course, TV was called the service that brought the war into the living room. But on the other hand, television correspondents and photographers were limited because at that time, television equipment was huge, and it was very difficult to cover battle actions effectively or over a long period of time. Whereas a still photographer at that time was working with 35mm cameras and with interchangeable lenses and was able to get in and out of battle scenes very quickly, and the communications were rugged but available. Television footage had to go to other cities, Hong Kong or Manila or some other place for editing. So the pictures came in quickly, and they came in really in considerable volume. Every day there was a batch of new pictures, either coming in by radio or sometimes by shipment and filling into the wire. So Americans in their newspapers got these unbelievably compelling, visceral kinds of pictures that left a mark on the local scene, and were probably, it was photographed, Vietnam was photographed like no war before, and my personal opinion is I don't know if we'll ever see a war photographed like that again.
You know, what journalists need when they're covering war is access to the battlefield, and all too often nowadays that battlefield is a city, it's a village wherever in the world. How back in the days of Vietnam we had a different situation where the Army was there. What were the rules of access to the battlefield for the journalists that were there covering the war?
Well, the only rule was that you needed a press pass, and they were very easy to come by. And the wars in World War II and Korea were limited by numbers of photographers for one thing, and they were working with bulky cameras for another, but the access was not nearly as simple as it was in Vietnam. You could just run out to the airport in Vietnam and ask, the only block was whether the pilot said yes or no. You can hop on board the helicopter, and they almost always said yes. So photographers could get to any battle site, I hate to say in moments, in minutes, but within a half an hour you could be almost anywhere. And so if they heard about a battle, it was out to the airport, onto a helicopter, and they're right in the middle of it. So access was immediate, and that resulted in many compelling, visceral, flesh and blood pictures that we had never seen before.
How these two images, what impact, how would you characterize their impact on the opinions back here at home of what was happening in Vietnam?
Well, they were really different. One thing I want to address was Horst talked about AP's policy on frontal nudity, which was correct. We did, and I assume we still do have a policy for that. And there was quite a discussion in Saigon over the picture, as Horst indicated. And when it got to us, we had the same conversation that we had over Eddie's. And my call, or the call, was, yes, except this picture is not prurient. There's nothing prurient about it. And how could we not use this picture? So that was the time to break policy, such as it applied to this kind of picture, and we moved it out. The impact of Eddie's picture and Nick's picture were very different. Eddie's picture had a political impact more than the horror of war impact, although some papers did not print it because of the shooting. But some people say that Eddie's picture ended the war. Well, the war existed longer after the picture than it existed before the picture. What it did was bounce those people off the fence who were sitting on the fence over supporting or not supporting the war. And it fell into the anti-war camp and drove a lot of people into it. Nick's picture more generated a compassion for innocents who are the victims of the horrors of war. Now, my guess is Santi will have something to say about that, the pictures coming out of the Middle East. And so it had that sort of a feeling, and it also played to the anti-war movement, but it was more about the horror of war. And today it's a symbol of anti-war, not that war, but any war.
We talk about, how these photographs from war zones spark action. And in Vietnam, we had the images coming out of the field, and we had the anti-war movement here at home covering it. And you were making the point earlier that we had a draft then, and that really did make a difference on how news consumers related to the images that were coming out.
Well, yes, bear in mind, the war in Vietnam was an American war to a great extent, and so a lot of the pictures, particularly after the military buildup and American combat troops were sent in, were pictures of American soldiers. And there was a draft at that time. So when the young people on college campuses saw these pictures of young soldiers fighting, wounded, dying, it was their face they saw in that. And so I think that had a heavy impact on certain the demonstrations on the college campuses, and it affected their parents, because what their parents saw was the pictures of their sons, faces of their sons in those pictures. So it did have an impact on the anti-war movement, no question about it.